Hello there everyone, welcome to Shadowman Stories. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Bill Ashford and I've been a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 9 years now. My great-grandfather hunted these hills before they became a park. My grandfather logged them. My father guided tourists through them. Me, I protect them. That September morning in 1956 started like any other. Coffee at sunrise, checking the weather, planning my patrol route. Then the radio crackled to life. Ranger station, this is Troop 47. We need help. Something happened at our camp. 2 boys they're dead. I grabbed my gear and headed out. Scout troops came through all the time. Usually their emergencies involved bee stings or twisted ankles. Not this time. The camp sat in a small clearing near Moonrise Hollow, about 5 miles from the main trail. I'd hiked that area since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. My great-grandfather used to tell stories about that hollow. Cherokee stories mostly. Said the spirits there never found peace. I found the surviving scouts huddled around their scoutmaster, Mr. Peterson. 12 boys, ages 10 to 15, all looking like they'd seen the devil himself. Their faces were pale as milk. Some were crying, others just stared at nothing. "Thank God you're here," Peterson said. His hands shook as he lit another cigarette. "I've been scouting for 20 years, never seen anything like this." The camp looked wrong. Tents slashed open, not torn. Clean cuts, like someone used a blade. Sleeping bags pulled out and scattered. Their food supplies were ransacked, but only the meat was gone. Canned beans, crackers, even candy bars sat untouched. "Where are the boys?" I asked. Peterson pointed toward the tree line, about 100 yards that way. I covered them with blankets, didn't want the others to see. I'd been military police in Korea, thought I'd seen everything, but when I pulled back those blankets, my stomach turned. 2 boys, maybe 13 years old, their throats were torn open. Not cut, torn, like an animal had done it, but the wounds were too precise, too small. The bite marks looked like they came from human teeth, child-sized teeth, but filed 2 sharp points. "Tell me what happened," I said to Peterson. The boys were asleep. I heard screaming around midnight. When I got out of my tent, I saw ... He took a shaky breath. "Children, wild children. They moved like animals, climbing trees, jumping from branch to branch. Their eyes reflected my flashlight, like a cat's." One of the scouts, a skinny kid with glasses, spoke up. "They weren't normal kids, Mr. They moved wrong, too fast, and they made sounds, clicking and chittering like bugs." I knelt down and examined the ground. Small footprints in the dirt, barefoot, but the toes were too long. The prints ended in what looked like claw marks. My great-grandfather's stories came flooding back. He'd told me about Cherokee children who died during the forced removal in 1838, said their spirits couldn't find peace, couldn't move on. They stayed in the mountains, growing wild and hungry. I'd always thought they were just stories. "Did you see how many?" I asked the boys. "Maybe 8 or 10, another scout said. "They surrounded Jimmy and Paul, dragged them away from the fire. We tried to help, but they moved so fast." I radioed headquarters. "Station, this is Ashford. We've got a situation at Moonrise Hollow. 2 fatalities. Requesting backup and medical." "Copy that, Bill. What's the cause?" I looked at the scared faces around me, at the strange footprints, at the impossible wounds. "Animal attack," I said. "Something unusual. I'm bringing the survivors out now." But as I led the troop away from that cursed hollow, I knew this wasn't over. Those weren't animal prints. And animals don't steal only meat while leaving everything else untouched. Something lived in Moonrise Hollow. Something that had once been human. 3 days later, I went back alone. I had to know what we were dealing with. The hollow sat hidden behind a wall of thick mountain laurel and pine. Most folks walked right past without noticing the gap in the trees. But if you knew where to look, you could find the old trail that led down into the valley. The Cherokee had lived here once. My great-grandfather showed me the ruins when I was 12. Stone foundations covered by moss and vines. A few broken pottery pieces. Nothing much to see, unless you knew the history. I followed the trail down, my rifle ready. The forest felt wrong, too quiet. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter. Even the insects seemed hushed. Halfway down, I found the third victim, Mr. Peterson, hung 15 feet up in an oak tree, his body facing a rock wall covered in old Cherokee symbols. His eyes were gone, carved out with surgical precision. Blood had dried in dark streams down his cheeks. No way he climbed up there himself. Something had put him there, arranged him like an offering. I studied the rock symbols. My great-grandfather had taught me some Cherokee, and I could make out a few words, warning signs, something about little spirits who hunger and children who cannot rest. The trail continued deeper into the hollow. Ancient trees formed a canopy so thick that even midday felt like twilight down here. Moss covered everything in a soft green blanket. The air smelled old and damp. That's when I found the settlement. Hidden in a grove of massive hemlocks sat the remains of an old homestead, not Cherokee. This looked like 1890s construction. White settlers who'd tried to make a life in this forgotten valley. The cabin was mostly collapsed, but I could see the layout. 2 rooms, stone chimney, root cellar. Scratch marks covered the wooden walls. Deep gouges like fingernails clawing desperately at the wood. Some person had tried to claw their way out of that cabin. In the root cellar, I found bones. Human bones, picked clean and cracked open for marrow. Small bite marks scored the larger pieces. The skull showed evidence of blunt force trauma. Whatever happened here, it had been violent and final. But it was the clothing that made my blood run cold. Scattered around the cellar were pieces of fabric, child-sized clothes from different time periods. A pair of overalls that looked 1920s, a little girl's dress from maybe the 1930s, and mixed in with the old stuff. I found a Boy Scout neckerchief, brand new. They were collecting trophies, and they'd been doing it for decades. I heard movement in the trees above me, soft rustling, like someone walking on branches. I looked up but saw only leaves and shadows. Then I heard the chittering sound the scouts had described, like insects, but with a musical quality, almost like children singing, if children could make sounds like that. The noises came from all around me now. They were watching, waiting. I backed toward the trail, my rifle raised. The chittering grew louder, more excited. They knew I was here. They knew I'd found their secret. Something dropped from a tree behind me. I spun around and caught a glimpse of a small figure scrambling into the underbrush, child-sized, but moving with inhuman speed and grace. More shapes flitted through the trees, dark shadows that might have been children. If children could climb like spiders and leap 20 feet between branches, I ran. Behind me, the chittering turned into something like laughter, high-pitched and cruel. They were enjoying the chase. I made it to my truck and drove straight to see old Mary Crow. She was Cherokee, maybe 90 years old, and she'd helped raise my great-grandfather after his parents died. If anyone knew the truth about Moonrise Hollow, it would be her. She lived in a small cabin on the reservation, about an hour's drive from the park. When I told her what I'd seen, her face went pale. "You shouldn't have gone there," she said. "That place is not for the living. Tell me about the children, Mary." My great-grandfather used to tell stories. She was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in Cherokee words I didn't understand. Finally, she switched to English. When the soldiers came to take our people away, some children hid in the mountains. They starved in the winter, died cold, and alone. Their spirits couldn't find the path to the Nightland. Too much anger, too much hurt. But what about the settlers? The white family? Evil finds evil, she said. The hungry spirits needed bodies, took the settler children first, made them like themselves. Then more came, lost children from different times, all twisted by the same darkness. She gave me a small leather pouch, filled with herbs, and told me how to make protection circles with tobacco and sage, ancient ways of keeping evil spirits at bay. "Don't go back there," she warned. "Nothing good can come from disturbing them." But I knew I had to return. Those things had killed for people now. They were getting bolder, and if the scouts were right about seeing 8 or 10 of them, more children were missing than just the Cherokee ones from 1838. Something had to be done. The next night, I went back to Moonrise Hollow with more than just my rifle. Mary's protective herbs filled my pockets, and I'd painted Cherokee protection symbols on my face with clay mixed from the old creek. This time, I wasn't running. I made camp at the edge of the hollow, built a fire, and waited. If they wanted to hunt, I'd give them prey worth taking. Around midnight, they came. I saw them first as movements in the trees, shadows flitting from branch to branch, never quite still enough to get a clear look. The chittering started low, a musical, building to an excited crescendo. Then one dropped down right in front of my fire. A girl, maybe 14 years old. She wore a faded dress that looked like it came from the 1930s. Her feet were bare and dirty, toes elongated into claw-like points. But it was her eyes that made my heart stop. Completely black, no white, no iris, just empty darkness that seemed to swallow light. "You came back," she said. Her voice sounded normal, almost sweet, but underneath I heard something else, an echo, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "I'm here to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady. She tilted her head like a curious bird. "Talk. Adults don't talk to children. They hurt them, leave them to die." More shapes emerged from the trees, children of different ages, all wearing clothes from different time periods. A boy in Cherokee buckskins, twin girls in matching 1920s dresses, a teenager in overalls with no shirt, his chest crisscrossed with old scars. They formed a circle around my fire, their black eyes reflecting the flames. "You're Cherokee," the leader said, studying my painted face. "Good, you should understand." "I understand you were hurt," I said. "I understand you died alone and scared. But killing innocent people won't bring you peace." She laughed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. "Peace. We are eternal children now. We play games that last forever. Hunt prey that runs and screams and bleeds." One of the younger ones, a boy maybe 10 years old, spoke up in Cherokee. I caught enough to understand. He was asking if they should kill me now or save me for later. The leader held up her hand. "This one knows our language, respects our ways. Perhaps he can stay and play." "I can't stay," I said, "but I can help you find peace. My great-grandfather knew the old ways, the proper ceremonies to help spirits cross over." Her expression darkened. "Cross over to what?" "To nothing. We tried dying. It was cold and lonely and terrible. This is better." She gestured to the others. "We are family now, brothers and sisters. In the hunt, we protect each other, care for each other. Add to our numbers when we find lost children." That's when I understood. They weren't just killing, they were recruiting. "The Boy Scout," I said. "You took him, didn't you?" The leader smiled, showing teeth filed to sharp points. "Tommy wanted to belong. City boy, parents always fighting. He was so lonely. Now he has brothers and sisters who will never leave him." A new figure stepped into the circle, a boy in a torn scout uniform, his merit badge sash hanging in tatters. His eyes were still human, not yet turned completely black. The change was recent. "Help me," he whispered. "I don't want to be like them. I want to go home." The leader moved faster than a striking snake. Her hand clamped over the boy's mouth. "Tommy, you're home now, forever and always." I saw my chance. While she was distracted, I threw a handful of Mary's protective herbs into the fire. The flames roared up, burning bright blue and white. The smell of sage and sweetgrass filled the air. The children hissed and backed away from the light. The leader released Tommy, her face contorted with rage. "Sacred fire," she spat. "Old magic. The kind that can send you home," I said. "The real home. The place where children's spirits are supposed to go." Tommy stumbled toward me, his human eyes wide with hope, but one of the other children grabbed him, pulled him back into the circle. "No one leaves the family," the leader said, "and no one enters our territory without permission." The circle began to close. I could see the muscles in their legs tensing, preparing to spring. Whatever supernatural strength they possessed, I was about to experience it firsthand. I pulled out a small leather pouch Mary had given me. "Cherokee tobacco," I said loudly, "mixed with prayers for the dead, blessed by an elder." The leader stopped. "You would perform the crossing ceremony, if you'll let me, if you'll stop the killing." She considered this, her head tilted at that unnatural angle. Around us, the other children chittered and whispered, in languages I couldn't understand. "One chance," she said finally. "Perform the ceremony. If it works, if we can cross over, the killing stops. If it fails," she smiled, that terrible smile, "you become one of us." I nodded, though my hands were shaking. Mary had taught me the basics, but I'd never performed a crossing ceremony, and certainly not for a pack of supernatural children who'd been trapped for over a century. But I had to try. For Tommy, still clinging to his humanity, for the scouts who'd died. for all the other children who might be taken if this continued. I reached for the tobacco pouch, praying that my great-grandfather's spirit would guide my hands. The children formed a wider circle as I prepared the sacred tobacco. My hands shook as I mixed the blessed leaves with sage and sweetgrass, just as old Mary had taught me. One mistake, one mispronounced word, and I'd either set them free or become one of them forever. "Tell me your names," I said. "All of them. The dead deserve to be remembered." The leader stepped forward first. "I am Sarah. I died in the winter of 1838, 7 winters old. My mother tried to hide me in a cave when the soldiers came. I froze to death waiting for her to return." The Cherokee boy spoke next. "Joseph died the same winter. Ate poisonous berries when the hunger became too much." One by one, they told their stories. Children from the Cherokee removal, settler kids who'd gotten lost in the mountains, a brother and sister from the 1920s whose parents died in a car accident. Each death tragic, each spirit trapped by trauma and pain. Tommy was last. "I'm still alive," he whispered, "but I can feel myself changing. Please, I want to see my mom again." I lit the sacred fire with prayers my great-grandmother had taught me in broken Cherokee. The flames burned clean and bright, casting dancing shadows on the trees. "Spirits of the mountains," I called out in Cherokee, "hear me. These children have suffered enough. Show them the path to the Nightland, where their ancestors wait." The leader laughed bitterly. "Pretty words, but we tried to cross over before. The path is blocked. Blocked by anger and betrayal and by fear," I interrupted. "You're afraid to let go, afraid of being alone again." Her black eyes flashed with rage. "We are never alone now. We have each other." "But you're not really together," I said. "You're all trapped in your own private hells, just sharing the same space. Sarah, you're still that 7-year-old girl freezing in a cave. Joseph, you're still dying of hunger. None of you have grown, or healed, or found peace." The sacred fire flared higher. In the flames, I could see shapes moving. Cherokee elders in traditional dress, a woman who might have been Sarah's mother, other figures, reaching out with open arms. "Look," I whispered, "they're waiting for you." Sarah took a step toward the fire, her expression uncertain for the first time. "Mama." The figure in the flames nodded and smiled, holding out her arms. But another child grabbed Sarah's arm. "Don't listen to him. It's a trick. If we cross over, we'll be separated forever." "No," I said. "In the Nightland there is no separation, no loneliness, no hunger or cold or fear, only peace." The fire grew brighter. More figures appeared in the flames. Parents, grandparents, ancestors, stretching back generations, all waiting patiently for their lost children to come home. Tommy broke free from the circle and stumbled toward me. "I can see my dad. He's there. He's waiting." The leader hissed and lunged for him, but the sacred light held her back. Where it touched her, she looked more like the frightened child she'd once been, and less like the monster she'd become. "Please," I said. To her, "let them go. Let yourself go. The anger has kept you trapped for over a century. Don't you want to rest?" She stared into the flames, her black eyes reflecting the dancing light. "What if... What if she doesn't want me anymore? What if I'm too twisted now, too changed?" "A mother's love doesn't change," I said, "even for Cherokee mothers, even after 100 years." Sarah began to glow with the same light as the fire. The darkness in her eyes faded, replaced by the natural brown they'd been in life. She looked like any normal child now, just one who'd been lost for far too long. "I remember now," she whispered. "I remember who I was before the hunger, before the anger." One by one, the other children began to change. The supernatural darkness lifted from them, revealing the innocent faces they'd worn in life. They were still children, but no longer twisted by rage and pain. Joseph stepped forward and took Sarah's hand. Then another child joined them, and another. They formed a chain leading toward the sacred fire, toward the waiting spirits of their families. "Will you help us cross?" Sarah asked me. "Will you speak the words?" I nodded and began. The ancient prayer Mary had taught me, words in Cherokee that asked the spirits to guide the lost ones home, to open the path between worlds, to heal the wounds that kept souls earthbound. The fire roared up like a pillar of light, reaching toward the stars. One by one, the children stepped into it, but they didn't burn. Instead, they glowed brighter and brighter until they were part of the light itself. Sarah was last. She turned to me with a peaceful smile. "Thank you for remembering us. for caring about Cherokee children, even though you're not one of us. I am one of you, I said. We're all children of these mountains. She nodded and stepped into the light. For a moment, I saw her clearly one last time, not as the supernatural predator she'd become, but as the little girl she'd always been inside. Then she was gone, joined with her mother in the land beyond death. The fire died down to normal flames. The hollow fell silent, except for the gentle sound of wind in the trees. Tommy collapsed beside me, fully human again, alive and breathing, and free. "Is it over?" he asked. I looked around the empty hollow. The oppressive feeling was gone. The wrongness that had hung over this place like a shroud had lifted. Birds were already beginning to sing in the trees. "Yeah," I said. "It's over." I carried Tommy out of Moonrise Hollow just as the sun was rising. He was weak but alive, and most importantly, he was still himself. The darkness hadn't had time to fully claim him. We told people he'd wandered off and gotten lost, that I'd found him in a cave, half dead from exposure. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was truth enough. The official report listed the deaths as a bear attack during an unusual period of aggressive behavior. The hollow was quietly declared off limits due to geological instability. Only a few people knew what really happened there, and we were content to keep it that way. Old Mary Crow nodded when I told her about the ceremony. "Good," she said. "Those children suffered long enough. Now they can rest with their families." Over the years, I've returned to the hollow many times. It's peaceful now, a place where Cherokee families come to remember their ancestors and leave offerings of tobacco and food. The oppressive darkness is gone, replaced by the kind of quiet that comes when old wounds finally heal. I trained my son in the Cherokee protection methods, though I never told him why. "Family traditions," I said, "ways of showing respect for the land and the people who came before us." He accepted that, and when he became a ranger himself, he continued. The traditions, the hollow remains, protected wilderness, modern conservation combined with ancient Cherokee wisdom created a sustainable solution. The children found their peace, and the public stays safe. Sometimes the old ways really are the best ways, but on certain autumn nights, when the moon is full and the wind carries the scent of wood smoke, I swear I can still hear children laughing in those mountains, not the cruel, predatory sounds the spirits used to make, but the genuine laughter of kids at play. They're at peace now, running and playing in the nightland with the families they thought they'd lost forever. And that's how it should be. Every child deserves to go home eventually, even the wild ones, even the lost ones, even the ones who forgot, for a while, how to be human. The mountains remember everything, and now they remember love instead of loss, healing instead of hurt. Some stories end with death. This one ends with children finally getting to go home. Bill Ashford served as a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for years. He passed peacefully in 1992, leaving behind detailed journals about his experiences protecting both the wilderness and the people who lived there, living and dead alike. His son continues the family tradition of guardianship, though he's never asked why certain hollows require extra attention during the full moon. The children of Moonrise Hollow have been at peace for over 60 years now. May they rest in the light of their ancestors' love, and may the mountains remember their laughter forever. I've spent 14 years studying black bears in the Adirondacks. I know their habits, their sounds, their scents. I know when they're angry, scared, or just curious. So when the radio crackled to life that October morning in 1989, I knew something was wrong before the dispatcher even finished talking. Massive bear attack in the High Peaks region to hunt us down. Tracks measure 15 inches across. 15 inches. I set down my coffee and stared at the radio. The biggest black bear paw I'd ever measured was 9 inches. 15 inches would mean a bear weighing over 2,000 pounds. No such animal existed in New York State. My name is Michael Thornton. I'm 37, and I've made bears my life's work. PhD in wildlife biology, author of the definitive guide to Adirondack bear behavior. When film crews need an expert, they call me. When universities need a consultant, they call me. If anyone knows what's possible with bears, it's me. And what the dispatcher described was impossible. I loaded my truck with plaster casting supplies and drove toward Lake Cotton. The October air was crisp, leaves turning gold and red on the mountainsides. Perfect hunting weather. Perfect weather for tourists to venture too deep into bear country and make stupid mistakes. That's what I figured. This was city hunters telling tall tales, maybe doctoring some photos. 15-inch tracks. Please, fear and adrenaline make everything look bigger. Mud distorts measurements. I'd seen it 100 times. The state trooper met me at the trailhead. Officer Martinez, a local guy who knew the woods. His face looked pale. "Doc, I've lived here all my life," he said. "This isn't like anything I've seen." We hiked 2 miles to the crime scene. The forest felt strange to quiet. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter. Even the insects seemed muted. The hair on my arms stood up, but I pushed the feeling aside. Crime scenes always felt unsettling. Then I saw the tracks. They were pressed deep into the soft earth beside a stream. I knelt down, pulled out my measuring tape, and felt my world shift. 15 inches long, 12 inches wide. The depth suggested incredible weight, far more than any known bear species could produce. I made plaster casts, photographing everything. The tracks showed something else that made my hands shake. Alternating patterns, 4-legged prints, then 2-legged prints. The creature had been walking upright for extended distances. Bears can walk on their hind legs, but only for short bursts. These tracks showed bipedal movement for over 100 yards. "Where are the bodies?" I asked Martinez. He led me 50 yards upstream. What I found there made me question everything. I thought I knew about bears. The first hunter lay crumpled against a pine tree. His spine had been crushed by a single blow-through, kind of impact that would require 3,000 pounds of force. The back of his jacket was shredded, but not randomly. The claw marks formed a pattern, almost like ... symbols. His rifle lay nearby, but not dropped or thrown. It had been taken apart. The barrel here, the stock there, the scope placed on a flat rock, arranged deliberately. Bears don't disassemble firearms. Bears don't arrange objects in geometric patterns. "Jesus," Martinez whispered. "What kind of animal does this?" I couldn't answer. Nothing in my 14 years of research had prepared me for this. Bears kill to defend territory or protect cubs. They don't create ... artwork ... from their victims' possessions. The second body was worse. The hunter had been positioned facing the mountain, arms spread wide like he was praying. His hunting knife was gone, but his wallet sat untouched in his pocket. No animal kills to steal weapons while ignoring valuables. I spent 3 hours at the scene, documenting everything. As the sun began to set, the forest grew even quieter. That's when I noticed the tree scratches, claw marks gouged deep into an oak tree, 12 feet above the ground. The cuts were 6 inches deep in living hardwood. I'd need power tools to make marks like that. Walking back to the truck, I kept looking over my shoulder. Something was watching us. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but every instinct screamed danger. Martinez felt it to his hand, stayed on his service weapon the entire hike out. That night, I spread my measurements and photos across my kitchen table. No matter how I calculated, the numbers didn't work. The tracks belonged to something that shouldn't exist. The kill patterns suggested intelligence far beyond any known bear behavior. I called my old professor at Cornell, Dr. Sarah Chen. She'd studied animal cognition for 30 years, tool use in bears. She said when I described the disassembled rifle, impossible. They lacked the cognitive development and fine motor control. You're looking at human involvement. Michael has to be. But I'd seen the scene. No human had arranged those rifle parts. The positioning required massive hands that left 15-inch paw prints in the mud. I hung up and poured myself a drink. Outside my cabin, the October wind whistled through the pines. Somewhere in those dark mountains, something was moving. Something that killed with intelligence and purpose. Something that was still out there. 3 days later, it happened again. This time the call came directly to my office. Park Ranger Jessica Kim, voice tight with fear. "Dr. Thornton, we need you at Moonrise Dam. Another hunting incident. Same ... unusual patterns." I drove through morning fog, my truck loaded with cameras and casting supplies. The forest looked different. Now shadows seemed deeper, sounds more muffled. Other drivers avoided my eyes at traffic lights, as if the whole region sensed something wrong. Jessica met me at the parking area. She was young, maybe 25, but her face had aged years in the past week. "Doctor, I've read your books," she said. "Everything you wrote about normal bear behavior. This isn't that." The third victim lay in a clearing near the old Mohawk Trail. Same devastating force, same impossible strength. But this time, I noticed something new. The victim's hunting gear had been scattered in a circle around his body. Not random, not from a struggle, placed deliberately, like offerings at a shrine. Has anyone contacted the local tribes? I asked Jessica. She looked confused. Tribes? Why? I pointed to the surrounding peaks. This whole area was sacred to the Mohawk people. Those mountains, the streams, the valleys, all part of their spiritual landscape. That afternoon, I drove to the Aquason Reservation. I needed to talk to someone who understood the old stories, the old warnings. Mary Standing Bear was 83, a traditional keeper of Mohawk history. She sat on her porch, watching me approach with eyes that seemed to see everything. "You're the bear scientist," she said, before I introduced myself. "You found the sacred guardian." Sacred guardian. The words sent chills down my spine. "Ma'am, I found evidence of an unusual bear," but she held up a weathered hand. "Sit, listen." I sat on her porch steps while she rocked slowly in her chair. "That mountain has been protected for 1,000 years, she said. "Before your people came, before the loggers and hunters, the Great Spirit placed a guardian there, a bear of massive size and ancient wisdom. Its job is to protect the sacred places from those who would harm them." "Mrs. Standing Bear, with respect, the tracks I found suggest an animal that's physically impossible." "Impossible for your science," she interrupted. "Not impossible for our spirits. The guardian chooses its form. Sometimes shadow, sometimes flesh, always watching, always protecting." She leaned forward, studying my face. "The men who died, they were not just hunting, were they? They were doing something else, something disrespectful." I thought about the crime scenes, the positioned bodies, the ritual arrangements of gear. "How did you know?" "Because the guardian only kills to protect the sacred places. It judges the intentions of those who enter its territory. Those with pure hearts pass safely. Those who come to harm or mock, ... She shrugged. "The mountain protects itself." That evening, I hiked back to the first crime scene. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold and red. I wanted to examine the area again, look for clues I'd missed. The tracks were still there, but something had changed. New marks in the mud, massive paw prints leading up the mountain toward the old Mohawk ceremonial grounds. I followed them as darkness fell. The trail wound through dense forest, up rocky slopes, past hidden streams. My flashlight beam danced across ancient bark, revealing fresh claw marks on trees, 12 feet high, 6 inches deep. The guardian had passed this way recently. Then I heard it, a sound like nothing in my textbooks. Deep, rumbling, but with an almost musical quality, like chanting, but from a throat designed for roaring. The sound echoed off the mountain faces, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. I clicked off my flashlight and waited. The forest held its breath, movement in the shadows ahead. Something massive flowing between the trees, darker than the darkness around it. I caught glimpses a shoulder higher than my head, eyes that reflected starlight, a presence that made the air itself feel heavy. The guardian was real. It paused 50 yards away, still hidden in shadow. I felt its attention like a physical weight, studying me, evaluating my intentions. Those ancient eyes seemed to look straight through to my soul. Then it was gone. No sound, no rustling leaves, simply absent, as if it had never been there. I stood frozen for 10 minutes before my legs would work again. When I finally made it back to my truck, my hands shook so badly I could barely start the engine. The next morning brought news of a fourth victim. This hunter had been found at the base of Bear Mountain itself, positioned in what Jessica described as a traditional prayer pose. His rifle had been destroyed, pieces scattered across the mountainside like an explosion, but his wallet and jewelry remained untouched. The pattern was becoming clear. The guardian wasn't randomly killing it, was executing judgment. Each victim had been found near sacred sites, and according to Jessica's investigation, each had been engaging in behavior that showed disrespect for the natural world. The first two had been urinating on ancient stone circles. The third had been carving his initials into a ceremonial tree. The fourth had been trying to dig up artifacts from a burial ground. They hadn't just been hunting, they'd been violating sacred spaces, and something very old, very powerful, had decided to stop. The calls started coming faster after that. Park Service, State Police, even the FBI field office in Albany. Everyone wanted the bear expert's opinion on what they were calling the High Peaks incidents. I told them the truth. We were dealing with an animal of unprecedented size and intelligence. I just didn't mention that I thought it might not be entirely an animal. Jessica Kim became my unofficial partner. She knew the park better than anyone and wasn't afraid to venture into the areas other rangers had started avoiding. Together, we mapped the incidents, looking for patterns. "Look at this," she said, spreading photos across her desk. "Every attack site is within 2 miles of a documented Mohawk sacred location. Stone circles, ceremonial caves, burial grounds." I studied the map. She was right. The Guardian I'd started thinking of it that way. 2 wasn't patrolling randomly. It was protecting specific places. "We need to go to Bear Mountain," I said. "The ceremonial cave Mary Standing Bear mentioned. If this thing has a home base, that's it." Jessica looked nervous. "The cave's been off limits since the attacks started. Chief's orders, then we go unofficially." We hiked before dawn, carrying minimal gear to avoid looking like a research expedition. The October morning was cold, our breath visible in the crisp air. The forest around Bear Mountain felt different from other areas, older, somehow more watchful. The cave entrance sat halfway up the mountain face, hidden behind a curtain of ancient pines. Massive stone slabs formed a natural doorway, covered with centuries-old Mohawk symbols. Even without understanding their meaning, I could feel their power. "Jesus," Jessica whispered. "How old is this place?" "Older than European settlement, probably older than written history." We approached carefully. The cave mouth was 15 feet high, disappearing into darkness. Fresh scratches marked the stone walls, the Guardian's claws, announcing its presence. Inside, the cave opened into a vast chamber. Our flashlights revealed painted walls, stone altars, and bones. Not human bones, offerings from successful hunts, arranged with reverence and ceremony. At the center of the chamber sat a massive depression in the rock floor, smooth, worn by countless years of use. A bed, or resting place, sized for something enormous. "He sleeps here," Jessica said, awe in her voice. That's when we heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, approaching from deeper in the cave system. Each step echoed like thunder in the stone chamber. Jessica grabbed my arm, her flashlight beam shaking. "We need to leave, now." But it was too late. The footsteps were coming from the cave mouth too. We were trapped. A shadow filled the entrance, blocking out the morning light. The Guardian stood there, fully visible for the first time. 14 feet tall on its hind legs, massive beyond belief. Its fur was almost black, but shot through with silver patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Its eyes glowed with intelligence that was definitely not animal. It studied us for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. Then it dropped to all fours and padded into the chamber. I'd never felt so small. The Guardian moved around us in a slow circle, massive paws silent on the stone floor. It could have killed us instantly, but instead, it was evaluating. It stopped in front of me, head lowered to my eye level. Those ancient eyes stared into mine, and suddenly, I felt something impossible, thoughts that weren't my own flooding my mind. Images flashed past. Generations of Mohawk ceremonies in this cave. The mountain, alive with spiritual energy. Decades of protection and guardianship. And underneath it all, a deep sadness. The Guardian was tired. So tired of killing, but duty-bound to continue. The mental contact lasted maybe 10 seconds. When it ended, I staggered backward, gasping. The Guardian padded to its resting place and settled down, never taking its eyes off us. The message was clear. "You may leave, but do not return unless invited." We stumbled out of the cave and down the mountain in silence. It wasn't until we reached Jessica's truck that either of us spoke. "Did that really happen?" she asked. I nodded, still shaking. "It's not just an animal, Jess, it's something much older, much more powerful." That night, I called Mary Standing Bear. "You met the Guardian," she said before I explained anything. "How did you?" "I can hear it in your voice. The change, it spoke to you, didn't it?" "Yes, images, emotions. It's sad." Mrs. Standing Bear, tired of killing but unable to stop. There was a long pause. "The Guardian has protected our sacred places for centuries, but the world is changing. More people, more disrespect. The burden grows heavier each year. What can we do? Perhaps it's time for the Guardian to have help. Someone who understands both worlds, the scientific and the spiritual." I knew what she was asking. 2 days later, a fifth victim was found. This time, I arrived before the other authorities. The hunter had been trying to dynamite the entrance to another sacred cave, looking for Indian treasure. His explosives had been gathered and arranged in a neat pile, unused. The Guardian had stopped him before he could desecrate the site. But this time was different. The body showed signs of a struggle. Claw marks on the victim's rifle, bullet holes in nearby trees. The hunter had fought back. On the Guardian, this meant injury was possible. In the soft earth near the cave, I found something that made my blood run cold. Drops of blood leading up the mountain. Not human blood, something darker, older. The Guardian was wounded, and somewhere in those ancient mountains, it was deciding whether humans could ever be trusted again. The blood trail led deep into the high peaks wilderness, to places no tourist ever saw. It followed Alonjiska had been ordered off the case by her superiors, who were starting to panic about the mounting body count. The October weather was turning cold. Snow dusted the highest peaks, and winter would come early this year. If the Guardian was seriously wounded, it might not survive to see spring. I found him 3 miles up Bear Mountain, in a hidden valley, that felt untouched by time. He lay beside a crystal-clear stream, his massive form still as death. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was too late. Then his eyes opened. Up close, the wound was worse than I'd feared. The hunter's bullets had torn through his shoulder and flank. Dark blood matted his silver-streaked fur. Without medical attention, infection would set in within days. But how do you treat a wounded spirit? How do you earn the trust of something that has every reason to hate your entire species? I sat down 20 feet away and waited. The Guardian watched me, those ancient eyes calculating. Finally, he struggled to his feet and limped to the stream to drink. The effort clearly caused him pain. That's when I made my decision. I pulled out my radio and called for a veterinary helicopter. When dispatch asked for details, I lied. Large black bear, injured by illegal hunters, needs immediate medical attention. While we waited, I approached slowly. The Guardian didn't move away, but every muscle in his body tensed. I knelt beside the stream and washed my hands, then reached into my pack for the first aid supplies I always carried in bear country. I'm going to help, I said quietly, if you'll let me. For a moment that stretched like eternity. We stared at each other. Then, impossibly, the Guardian lowered his great head in what could only be described as a nod. Working carefully, I cleaned the wounds and applied pressure bandages. The Guardian's flesh felt warm, real, completely physical despite the supernatural abilities I'd witnessed. He endured the treatment without complaint, though I could see the pain in his eyes. The helicopter arrived 2 hours later. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the best wildlife veterinarian in the state, rappelled down with her equipment. My God, she breathed when she saw the Guardian. How big is this animal? Bigger than anything on record. I said, can you save him? Sarah was a professional. She asked no questions about the impossible size or the intelligent way the Guardian cooperated with her examination. She just worked, cleaning wounds, administering antibiotics, suturing tears that would have killed any normal animal. He'll live, she finally announced, but he needs rest, and he'll have scars. The Guardian seemed to understand. As Sarah packed her equipment, he touched her hand gently with one massive paw, gesture of gratitude that brought tears to her eyes. After the helicopter left, I stayed with the Guardian through the night. We didn't communicate telepathically again, but words weren't necessary. Something had changed between us. Trust, fragile but real, had been established. As dawn broke over the mountains, the Guardian rose and padded to the edge of the hidden valley. He looked back at me once, then melted into the forest like smoke. That afternoon, I drove to the Aquason reservation to see Mary Standing Bear. The Guardian lives, she said before I spoke. Yes, but Mrs. Standing Bear, this can't continue. More hunters will come, more developers. The killing will never stop unless something changes. She rocked in her chair, considering. What do you propose? Official protection, legal safeguards for the sacred sites. If I can get the Park Service to declare these areas off limits for scientific reasons, you would do this. Risk your career to protect our Guardian. I thought of those ancient, tired eyes, the sadness I'd felt when the Guardian shared his thoughts, the weight of centuries of lonely duty. Yes, Mary Standing Bear smiled. Then perhaps there is hope for your people after all. Over the next month, I worked feverishly to establish protection for the sacred sites. Using my position as the state's leading bear expert, I filed reports recommending that large areas around Bear Mountain be closed to hunting and development. Aggressive bear behavior during mating season, I wrote, recommend area closure for public safety and wildlife research. It was the truth, in a way. The bureaucracy moved slowly, but it moved. Sacred sites gained protection under the guise of wildlife conservation. Hunting was banned in a 5-mile radius around Bear Mountain. Development permits were denied. The Guardian had official sanctuary at last, but the real test came in November, when 3 hunters ignored the closure signs and entered the protected area with high-powered rifles and bear traps. They weren't hunting for food or sport, they were hunting for the monster bear that had made national news. I got the emergency call at midnight. Jessica had spotted their camp on the mountainside, complete with military-grade equipment. They were planning to siege the Guardian's cave at dawn. I arrived to find the camp empty, except for 3 neat piles of hunting gear. The men were gone, but not dead. They'd been deposited, unconscious but unharmed, at the nearest hospital with notes pinned to their jackets. Leave the mountain alone. The Guardian was learning restraint. Violence only when absolutely necessary. Mercy when possible. He was evolving, just as our relationship was evolving. That winter, I became the unofficial liaison between the modern world and something far older. Park rangers reported to me. Tribal elders consulted with me. And somewhere in the protected wilderness of Bear Mountain, a supernatural guardian watched over sacred places with ancient wisdom and newfound hope. The killing had stopped. The mountain was safe. But our story was just beginning. Spring came early to the Adirondacks in 1990. Snow melted from the valleys, and the first tourists began arriving for hiking season. But Bear Mountain remained closed, protected by signs warning of aggressive wildlife and ongoing research. I visited the sacred cave on the first warm day of April. The Guardian was waiting for me. He looked different, healthier, more at peace. The winter's rest had healed his wounds, and I thought, his spirit. When he saw me approach, he actually seemed to smile, baring massive teeth in what was unmistakably a gesture of welcome. This time, our mental connection was stronger, clearer. I felt his gratitude for the protection we'd established, his relief that the sacred sites were safe. But underneath, I sensed something else, loneliness. For centuries, he'd been the sole protector of these mountains. Now, for the first time, he had an ally who understood both worlds, the rational and the spiritual. *, will you continue? The thought appeared in my mind, not in words, but in images and emotions. I saw myself years from now, grey-haired and weathered, still standing between the Guardian and those who would exploit these sacred places. I saw a network of protection spreading across the Adirondacks, other supernatural guardians emerging from hiding to reclaim their ancient roles. Yes, I answered without speaking. For as long as I'm able. The Guardian's massive head nodded once. Then he did something that surprised me. He padded to the back of the cave and returned carrying something in his mouth. It was a small stone disc, carved with Mohawk symbols I didn't recognize. He placed it carefully at my feet. When I picked it up, the stone felt warm, alive with some kind of energy. Mary Standing Bear would later tell me it was a Guardian stone, a symbol of protection and authority, used by Mohawk spiritual leaders for centuries. You speak for the mountain now, the Guardian's thoughts conveyed. Others will listen. Over the following months, that prediction proved true. My scientific reputation gave weight to my conservation recommendations. Park officials implemented my suggestions without question. Politicians accepted my environmental impact studies. I used this influence carefully, identifying other sacred sites throughout the Adirondacks and establishing protections for them too. Each location I investigated showed signs of supernatural guardianship, massive tracks, unexplained phenomena, a sense of ancient watchfulness. The Guardian wasn't alone. The mountains were full of protectors, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. By autumn, I'd established protection for 17 sacred sites across 3 counties. Hunting was banned, development was restricted, and tourism was carefully controlled. The Guardians had their sanctuaries, but the most important change was in the relationship between the human and spirit worlds. For the first time in centuries, they were working together instead of in opposition. Jessica Kim became my partner in this work, though she never knew the full truth. She believed we were protecting unusually aggressive bears, which wasn't entirely wrong. Other park rangers joined our conservation efforts, drawn by a sense that these places were somehow special. Mary Standing Bear served as our cultural advisor, helping us understand the spiritual significance of the sites we protected. Through her, I learned the proper ceremonies for maintaining peaceful relationships with the guardians. I discovered that tobacco offerings left at cave entrances were always accepted, that certain stones, arranged in traditional patterns, could communicate respect and good intentions, that the guardians preferred cooperation to confrontation whenever possible. In my final encounter with the Bear Mountain Guardian, he showed me something that changed my understanding of these ancient protectors forever. Deep in the cave system, past chambers I'd never seen, lay a vast underground lake. The water was so clear it seemed like polished glass, reflecting the stone ceiling like a mirror. The Guardian led me to the water's edge and touched the surface. With one massive paw, ripples spread across the lake, and in their patterns I saw visions, other mountains, other guardians, spirits in the form of wolves, eagles, great cats, each protecting sacred places across North America, each waiting for the day when humans would remember the old agreements, the ancient partnerships. We were allies once, the Guardian's thoughts explained. We can be allies again. I understood then that our work in the Adirondacks was part of something much larger, a restoration of balance between the physical and spiritual worlds, a return to the old ways, when humans respected the sacred places and the entities that protected them. When I retired from the Park Service in 2010, I trained my replacement carefully, not in the full truth that would come later, if she proved worthy, but in the special wildlife management protocols needed to maintain protection for our sanctuaries. The knowledge was preserved. The Guardian's trust was maintained. The sacred places remained safe. Today, Bear Mountain is still protected. Hikers sometimes report glimpses of an unusually large bear in the distance, but no one has been harmed. The Guardian keeps his ancient vigil, supported now by human institutions and understanding hearts. I'm 68 years old as I write this, and I've never told this story in full until now. People wouldn't believe it, and maybe that's for the best. Some truths are too dangerous for the world to know, but I wanted the record to exist, somewhere, for those who come after me, for those who might encounter guardians in other sacred places, for those who understand that some spirits choose guardianship over rest, and our role is not to hunt them, but to honor their sacred duty. The mountains remember, the guardians endure, and somewhere between the rational and the spiritual, humans and spirits can still find common ground. Just last week, I received a call from a young biologist in Montana. She'd found tracks near Glacier National Park, possibly large wolf prints, 15 inches across. She wanted my advice on unusual predator behavior in the area. I smiled as I reached for my phone. The guardians were awakening across the continent, and they would need new allies, new protectors, new voices to speak for the sacred places. The work continues. The old agreements are being renewed, and in the shadow of Bear Mountain, an ancient guardian rests peacefully, knowing that his vigil is no longer solitary. Some spirits, after all, are meant to be honored, not hunted. End of account. Asterisk, Dr. Michael Thornton served as senior wildlife biologist for the New York State Park. Service from 1976 to 2010. His conservation efforts resulted in permanent protection for over 200,000 acres of Adirondack wilderness. He currently lives in Lake Placid, where he continues to consult on wildlife management and cultural preservation issues. Asterisk. I still remember the exact moment my life changed forever. It was October 15, 1973, and I was sitting in my cramped office at the Allegheny National Forest headquarters, filling out paperwork about deer population counts. Boring stuff, really. After 13 years as a forest ranger, most days blended together like trees in a thick forest. My name is David Whitehawk. My mother was half Seneca, which makes me part of the people who lived on this land long before it became a national forest. Most folks don't know that when they see my ranger uniform, but it matters to me. These woods aren't just my job, they're in my blood. The radio crackled to life around 4 p.m. Base, this is Survey 1. We've got something unusual near Kinzua Dam. I picked up the radio. This is Whitehawk. What kind of unusual? The pilot's voice sounded shaky. You're not going to believe this, but I just saw something with wings. Big wings. And it looked human. I sighed. Pilots see a lot of strange things when the sun hits the trees just right. How big are we talking? 12 feet across, easy, maybe more. It was perched on top of the old radio tower by the dam. When it saw my plane, it spread these huge bat-like wings and took off. Moved like nothing I've ever seen. Probably just a large bird. Eagles can look pretty big from a distance. David, I've been flying for 20 years. This wasn't a bird. It had arms and legs. It stood upright like a person. The pilot, Jim Martinez, was one of the most level-headed guys I knew. If he said he saw something weird, it was worth checking out. Plus, we'd been having strange reports from that area for weeks. Hikers talking about weird sounds at night. Campers leaving early because they felt watched. Even some of the old-timers from the nearby Seneca Reservation had been asking questions about something dark near the flooded lands. "Can you get some photos?" I asked. "Already did. Dropping them off now." An hour later, Jim walked into my office with a manila envelope. His face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he handed me the pictures. "Take a look at these." I spread the black and white photos across my desk. The first few showed normal forest canopy and the concrete structure of Kinzua Dam. Then, I got to the fourth photo, and my blood went cold. There, clear as day, was something that shouldn't exist. A figure crouched on top of the 100-foot radio tower. It had the basic shape of a person. Head, torso, arms, and legs, but massive wings stretched out from its back like a giant bat. The detail was sharp enough to see that it was covered in dark fur or feathers. Its eyes seemed to glow even in the black and white photo. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. Jim sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. "That's what I was hoping you could tell me. You know these woods better than anyone. Ever heard of anything like this?" I studied the photo again. The creature's wings had to be at least 12 feet across, just like Jim said. Its arms were long and muscular. Most disturbing were its eyes. They seemed to be looking directly at the camera, with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. "No," I said finally. "Nothing like this." But that wasn't entirely true. Growing up, my grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, before the dam was built. She'd talk about spirits that protected sacred places, guardian spirits that could take different forms when the burial grounds were threatened. I'd always thought they were just stories to teach respect for the land. Now, I wasn't so sure. "We need to get out there," I said, standing up. "If there's some kind of unknown animal in the forest, we need to document it properly." Jim shook his head. "Count me out. I'm not going anywhere near that thing on the ground." I couldn't blame him. Looking at that photo gave me the creeps too. But it was my job to investigate strange animal reports, no matter how strange they seemed. As I gathered my gear, camera, binoculars, radio, I tried to push down the growing feeling that this wasn't just about an unknown animal. The location bothered me. Kinzua Dam had flooded thousands of acres of Seneca land in the 1960s, including ancient burial grounds. The government had promised to relocate the graves, but everyone knew some had been missed. Maybe many had been missed. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "The spirits of our ancestors don't rest easy when their bones lie beneath water that shouldn't be there." I loaded my truck and headed toward the dam as the sun began to set. The October air was crisp, and the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. It should have been beautiful, but something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet, no birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. As I drove deeper into the woods, my radio started picking up interference. Static popped and hissed, making communication impossible. My compass needle swung wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Even my watch seemed to be running slow. By the time I reached the area near the dam, full darkness had fallen. I parked my truck and grabbed my flashlight, but when I tried to turn it on, nothing happened. The batteries were completely dead, even though I'd put in fresh ones that morning. Standing there in the dark, surrounded by the ancient trees of my ancestors, I finally understood what I was really dealing with. This wasn't just about an unknown animal. Something supernatural was happening in these woods, and it was connected to the flooded burial grounds beneath Kinzua Dam. Something that had been waiting a long time to make itself known. I spent that first night in my truck, doors locked, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. When morning came, I decided to investigate the radio tower where the creature had been spotted. If something that big was living in the area, there had to be evidence. The tower stood about 2 miles from the dam, an old steel structure used for Forest Service communications. As I hiked toward it through the thick pine forest, I noticed things that made my ranger training kick in. Broken branches about 8 feet off the ground, too high for any normal animal. Strange scratches in the bark of old oak trees, like someone had dragged claws down the trunk. And everywhere, that same unnatural quiet that had bothered me the night before. The radio tower rose 100 feet into the morning sky, its red and white paint peeling from years of weather. At the base, I found the first real evidence that something unusual was happening. The ground was torn up like a battlefield, deep gouges in the earth that could have been made by massive claws. And scattered around the base of the tower were pieces of metal and plastic that looked like they came from camera equipment. That's when I remembered that Jim had mentioned a photography crew working in the area. They were supposed to be documenting the environmental impact of the dam for some government report. I'd been meaning to check on them, but with all the paperwork and routine patrols, I'd forgotten. I followed a trail of broken equipment deeper into the woods, my unease growing with each step. About a quarter mile from the tower, I found the first photographer's body. Actually, found isn't the right word. You don't find something that's hanging 80 feet in the air. The body was impaled on the rusted spear of an abandoned oil derrick, one of dozens left over from the drilling boom of the 1930s, but there was no way anyone could have gotten up there. The derrick had no ladder, no climbing pegs, nothing, and the man wasn't wearing any climbing gear. I used my binoculars to get a better look, and what I saw made my stomach turn. The body had been positioned carefully, almost ceremonially. It faced toward the flooded valley where the old Seneca village had been. The man's eyes were gone, removed so cleanly it looked like surgery. His throat had a single puncture wound, precise and deep, but the worst part was the blood. There wasn't any. The body should have been covered in it, but instead, it looked like he'd been drained completely dry, like something had consumed every drop. I radioed for backup, but the interference was even worse during the day. All I got was static and strange sounds that almost seemed like voices whispering in a language I didn't recognize. My compass was still spinning wildly, and now my truck wouldn't start either. Something was systematically disrupting every piece of modern technology in the area. While I waited for help that might never come, I searched the area around the derrick. That's when I found the second photographer's camera bag. The expensive equipment inside was smashed, but the film canisters were intact. If these guys had photographed whatever killed them, the evidence might still exist. I was stuffing the film into my jacket when I heard it, the sound of wings, massive wings, beating slowly overhead. I looked up through the canopy of pine branches and saw a shadow pass between me and the sun. Whatever was up there was huge, easily as big as the photos had shown. For a moment, it hovered directly above me, and I felt like a mouse being watched by a hawk. Then it was gone, disappearing toward the deeper woods with a speed that defied everything I knew about flight. But in that brief moment when it blocked the sun, I saw two glowing red eyes staring down at me, with an intelligence that was definitely not animal. I ran back to my truck, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This time the engine started, as if whatever had been interfering with it had decided to let me leave. I drove straight to the nearest town and got the film developed at the Wanahua photo shop. The pictures showed exactly what I'd feared they would. The photography crew had been documenting the flooded cemetery. Photo after photo showed the water level of the reservoir, with the tops of old headstones just barely visible beneath the surface. In several shots, you could make out the rectangular shapes of sunken grave markers, arranged in neat rows, like a city of the dead lying beneath the dark water. But in the last few photos, something else appeared. First, just a shadow in the background, then a clearer shape perched on a dead tree at the water's edge. Finally, in the very last picture, the creature was fully visible, captured in perfect detail as it launched itself from the tree toward the camera. The image was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The creature was definitely humanoid, but covered in dark feathers or fur. Its wings were enormous, stretching at least 12 feet from tip to tip. Its face was angular and fierce, with those glowing red eyes that seemed to burn with intelligence and rage. But what struck me most was how it held itself. This wasn't some mindless beast. It moved with purpose, with thought, and it was looking directly at the camera with an expression that could only be described as fury. I stared at that last photo for a long time, trying to process what I was seeing. Then, I noticed something else. In the background, barely visible through the trees, was the oil derrick where I'd found the first body. The creature had been photographed in the exact spot where it would later kill the photographer. It had been hunting them. As I sat in my truck outside the photo shop, holding evidence of something that shouldn't exist, my grandmother's stories came flooding back. She'd told me about Flying Eagle, a Seneca warrior who died defending the burial grounds from soldiers in the 1800s. According to legend, his spirit had been so powerful and his anger so great that death couldn't contain him. He'd become something more than human, a guardian spirit sworn to protect the sacred places of his people. The stories said he had wings like a great bird and eyes that glowed like fire. He could move through the air faster than any natural creature, and his rage was terrible to behold. I'd always thought it was just a story. Now, looking at the photograph of something that matched that description perfectly, I realized that some stories might be more than legend. And if Flying Eagle was real, if he was back, then anyone who disturbed the flooded burial grounds was in mortal danger, including me. By the time I got back to the Forest Service station, word had spread about the missing photographers. The state police were involved now, along with a search and rescue team from Pittsburgh. Nobody believed my story about finding a body 80 feet up on an oil derrick, but they had to investigate anyway. When they reached the site, the body was gone, not fallen to the ground, not pulled down by animals, just gone, like it had never been there at all. The only evidence left was the bent metal spear at the top of the derrick, still stained with blood. The search team leader, a gruff ex-military guy named Captain Morris, accused me of filing a false report. "Ranger Whitehawk, we've got 3 missing persons and you're telling us fairy tales about flying monsters. Where are those photographers really?" I showed him the photos. His attitude changed fast. "What the hell is this thing?" he whispered, staring at the image of the winged creature. "I don't know," I lied, "but it's real, and it's killed at least 1 person." Morris organized a full search of the area around Kinzua Dam. 24 men with dogs, helicopters, and enough firepower to handle a small war. They set up a base camp near the flooded cemetery and began systematic sweeps of the forest. They found the second photographer that evening. This time, the body was on the ground, arranged in a sitting position facing the water. Like the first victim, his eyes had been surgically removed and his throat punctured with precision. But there was something else that made my blood run cold. The body was positioned in the exact pose of traditional Seneca prayer, hands folded, legs crossed, head tilted toward the sacred water. Someone, or something, was sending a message. The search team made camp for the night, posting guards and keeping bright lights burning around the perimeter. I volunteered for the first watch, along with 2 state troopers. We positioned ourselves on a small hill that gave us a clear view of the reservoir and the surrounding forest. Around midnight, the creature came for us. It started with the lights. One by one, the powerful camping lights around our perimeter began to flicker and dim. Then our radios died, filled with the same whispering static I'd heard before. The whispers seemed to be coming from the water itself, like voices calling from beneath the surface. "Something's wrong," one of the troopers said, reaching for his rifle. That's when we saw the eyes, 2 red points of light, hovering about 8 feet off the ground at the edge of our camp. They moved slowly, deliberately, like someone walking through the trees, but there was no sound of footsteps, no rustling of leaves, just those burning red eyes, getting closer. "Freeze! Police!" the trooper shouted, raising his weapon. The eyes stopped moving. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then a voice spoke from the darkness, deep and resonant, speaking in a language I recognized as Seneca. What did it say? The trooper whispered. I translated, my mouth dry with fear. It said, "You do not belong here." The creature spoke again, this time in English, its voice carrying clearly through the night air. "The bones of my people lie beneath this water. You have disturbed their rest. Now you will join them." The trooper fired 3 quick shots toward the eyes. The muzzle flashes lit up the forest for brief moments, and in that strobing light, we saw the creature clearly for the first time. It was magnificent and terrifying. 7 feet tall when standing upright, covered in dark feathers that seemed to absorb light. Its wings were folded against its back, but even so, I could see they were massive. Its face was angular and proud, definitely human in basic structure, but changed by whatever supernatural force had created it. And those eyes, they burned with an intelligence and fury that made my soul shrink. The bullets had no effect. The creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it spread its wings to their full 12-foot span and let out a cry that was part human scream, part bird of prey. The sound echoed across the water and through the forest, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Then it launched itself into the air. What happened next was like watching a nightmare come to life. The creature moved through the air with impossible speed and agility, diving and spinning in ways that defied every law of physics. It swept through our camp like a force of nature, destroying equipment and scattering the search team. But it wasn't random destruction. The creature was hunting. It dove toward Captain Morris, who was running for the trees. Its talons, I could see now that its hands had changed into sharp, curved claws, reached out to grab him. Maurice dove behind a tree just in time, and the creature's claws raked deep gouges in the oak bark. The thing circled around for another attack, moving so fast it was just a blur of feathers and rage. This time it went for one of the younger state troopers, a kid who couldn't have been more than 25. I watched in horror as the creature snatched the trooper off the ground and carried him high into the air. The young man's screams echoed through the night as they disappeared over the forest canopy. By morning, we found his body arranged in the same prayer position as the second photographer, facing the flooded cemetery. His eyes were gone, his throat punctured, his blood drained completely. But this time, there was something new. Carved into the tree beside the body were symbols I recognized from my grandmother's teachings. Ancient Seneca writing that told a story of betrayal, death, and a guardian spirit's eternal duty. The creature wasn't just killing randomly. It was executing a plan, sending a message that grew clearer with each death. The flooded burial ground was sacred, and it would be protected at any cost. As I knelt beside that young trooper's body, I realized that I might be the key to understanding what was happening. My Seneca heritage, my knowledge of the old stories, my position as a forest ranger, it all connected me to this situation in ways I was just beginning to understand. But understanding and surviving were two different things, and I was starting to doubt whether anyone would make it out of these woods alive. The third night, I went alone. Captain Morris had called off the search after losing 2 men. The state police declared the area off limits and set up roadblocks to keep people away. But I knew the killings wouldn't stop. The creature flying eagle, I was now certain, wouldn't rest until he felt the burial grounds were properly protected. I parked my truck near the flooded cemetery and walked to the water's edge, carrying only a small bag of tobacco and sage. If my grandmother's stories were true, these were the traditional offerings for speaking with spirits. If they were just fairy tales, I was about to become the creature's next victim. The reservoir stretched out before me in the moonlight, dark and still as a mirror. Somewhere beneath that water lay the bones of hundreds of my ancestors, flooded when the government built the dam despite treaty promises to preserve the sacred sites. I sat down on a fallen log and waited. The creature came just after midnight, dropping from the sky to land silently about 20 feet away. Up close, I could see details that the photographs had missed. The feathers that covered his body were midnight black, with an iridescent sheen that caught the moonlight. His face was definitely human, but changed the bones more prominent. The eyes larger and glowing with their own inner fire. When he folded his massive wings against his back, he looked like a dark angel from some ancient nightmare. "You are Seneca," he said in our native language. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "I am," I replied in the same language. My grandmother was Mary Whitehawk, daughter of Joseph Cornplanter. The creature's glowing eyes studied me for a long moment. I knew Joseph. He was a good man who tried to protect our people's sacred places. As do I. I am David Whitehawk, forest ranger. I protect these lands. You protect them for the white government that flooded our cemetery. You serve those who dishonor our ancestors. I pulled out the tobacco and sage, holding them up so he could see. I bring offerings. I want to understand. Something changed in his expression. The rage was still there, but curiosity flickered in those burning eyes. You follow the old ways. My grandmother taught me before she died. She told me the stories, including the story of Flying Eagle, the warrior who became a guardian spirit. The creature straightened, and for a moment, I saw the proud Seneca warrior he had once been. I am Flying Eagle. I died defending this land in 1838, when the soldiers came to force our people west. My body fell into the river, but my spirit could not rest. The bones of our ancestors called to me, demanding protection. I placed the tobacco and sage on the ground between us. The dam was built despite our protests. Many of us tried to stop it, not hard enough. His voice rose to a harsh cry. They flooded sacred ground. They broke treaties. They scattered our people and drowned our past. For decades I have waited beneath the water, growing stronger, waiting for the right time to strike back. So you killed the photographers. They came to document our shame, to take pictures of our ancestors' bones beneath the water for their government reports. They deserved death. I thought about the young state trooper, barely out of training, who had died simply for doing his job. Not all of them were guilty. Flying Eagle's eyes flared brighter. All who disturbed this place are guilty, including you, Forest Ranger. He took a step toward me, and I felt the temperature around us drop. This was the moment of truth. Either my heritage and the traditional offerings would mean something to him, or I would join his other victims. I want to help, I said quickly. I can protect the sacred sites. I have authority to close areas to the public, to restrict access. We can work together. The creature stopped. His head tilted like a bird, listening to a distant sound. You would do this? You would turn against your employers. The Forest Service doesn't need to know the real reason. I can create wildlife preservation zones, claim there are endangered species that need protection. I can keep people away from the flooded cemetery and the other sacred sites. For a long moment, Flying Eagle stood motionless, considering my offer. The night air was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. Finally, he spoke. Show me. Over the next hour, I explained my plan. Using my authority as a forest ranger, I could establish ecological protection zones around all the known Seneca sacred sites in the area. I could post signs, warning of dangerous wildlife, file reports about unstable ground conditions, even work with state authorities to create no-fly zones for aircraft. The general public would stay away, and the sacred places would be protected. In return, Flying Eagle would stop killing people. The photographers and the state trooper were already dead, but future visitors would be safe as long as they respected the boundaries I established. There is wisdom in this, he said finally. But if you betray me, if you allow the sacred places to be disturbed again, I will hunt you down like the others. I understand. The creature reached into a leather pouch at his side and pulled out something that made my blood freeze. It was a human eye, perfectly preserved, still glowing faintly with supernatural light. This belonged to the first photographer, Flying Eagle said. I keep the eyes of those who seek to document our shame. Through them, I can see any threat to the sacred places. If you fail in your promise, I will know. He tossed the eye to me, and I caught it instinctively. It was warm and seemed to pulse, with its own heartbeat. The moment it touched my palm, visions flashed through my mind, images of the flooded cemetery, the bones of my ancestors lying beneath dark water, and Flying Eagle himself hovering over it, all like a dark guardian. Angel, the pact is sealed, he said. Protect the sacred places, and I will spare the innocent. But remember, I am eternal. I will be watching forever. With that, he spread his massive wings and launched himself into the night sky, disappearing over the forest canopy like a shadow passing across the moon. I sat by the water until dawn, the preserved eye growing cold in my palm, trying to process what had just happened. I had made a deal with a supernatural being, a creature of legend that had stepped out of my grandmother's stories to become terrifyingly real. But I was alive, and I had a chance to prevent more deaths while protecting the sacred places of my people. Now I just had to figure out how to keep my end of the bargain. That was 37 years ago. I kept my promise to Flying Eagle, and he kept his. Within 6 months of our meeting, I had established wildlife protection zones around every known Seneca sacred site in the Allegheny National Forest. I filed reports about rare bird species, unstable geological conditions, and sensitive ecological areas that required restricted access. My supervisors were impressed with my dedication to conservation. They never knew the real reason behind the restrictions. The killings stopped. Hikers still reported strange sounds and unexplained feelings of being watched, but no one else died. Aircraft pilots learned to avoid the area around Kinzua Dam after several reports of severe electromagnetic interference that played havoc with navigation equipment. The region became known as a place where technology didn't work reliably, which only helped keep people away. I worked with Seneca Nation lawyers to establish legal protections for the sacred sites, using environmental law to create a framework that would outlast my career. We succeeded in getting several areas designated as culturally significant, which provided additional layers of protection. Every few months, I would visit the flooded cemetery at night, leaving tobacco offerings and updating Flying Eagle on my progress. Sometimes he would appear, dropping silently from the sky to perch on a dead tree at the water's edge. Other times, I would just feel his presence, watching from the darkness. He never spoke about the preserved eye he had given me, but I kept it in a small leather pouch that I wore around my neck. Occasionally, I would see flashes of vision through it, threats to the sacred sites that Flying Eagle wanted me to address. A developer considering a project too close to a burial ground, government officials discussing new dam construction, archaeologists planning unauthorized excavations. I handled each situation through official channels, using my position and growing reputation as a conservation expert to redirect attention away from the sacred places. Flying Eagle's supernatural surveillance network proved more effective than any modern security system. I retired from the Forest Service in 2005, but not before training my replacement in the cultural sensitivity protocols necessary for managing the protected areas. I was careful to choose someone with respect for Native American heritage and a willingness to maintain the restrictions without asking too many questions. The night before my retirement became official, Flying Eagle appeared one last time. He looked exactly the same as he had 37 years earlier. Supernatural beings don't age like humans do. You have kept your word, he said, settling onto his usual perch by the water. The sacred places are safe. For now, I replied, but I won't always be here to protect them. Neither will you need to be. The legal protections you have established will endure, and I will always be watching. He spread his wings wide, preparing to take flight. There is honor in you, David Whitehawk. Your ancestors would be proud. With that, he launched himself into the night sky, disappearing over the forest for what I somehow knew would be the last time. I felt the preserved eye around my neck grow warm for a moment, then cool forever. Flying Eagle had released me from our pact. The guardian spirit no longer needed a human partner to protect the sacred places. Today, the areas around Kinzua Dam and the other Seneca sacred sites remain off-limits to development. Environmental groups praise the successful conservation efforts. Government officials point to the region as an example of effective wilderness management. Tourists are drawn to other parts of the forest, leaving the sacred places in peace. Most people assume the success is due to good planning and environmental activism. They don't know about the Dark Guardian, who watches over the flooded cemetery, ensuring that the bones of the ancestors rest undisturbed beneath the water. But I know he's still there. Occasionally, pilots report glimpses of something large and winged near the dam. Hikers mention the strange quiet that falls over certain areas of the forest. Electronic devices still malfunction mysteriously in the vicinity of the sacred sites. Flying Eagle continues his eternal duty, protecting the sacred places of his people. The difference now is that he doesn't need to kill to do it. The legal and cultural protections provide a framework that keeps most threats away, and the few that slip through face the full supernatural power of a guardian spirit who has had decades to perfect his methods. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still, I think I can hear voices calling from beneath the water. The spirits of my ancestors, no longer restless, no longer crying out for protection. They rest in peace because they know their guardian watches over them. And sometimes, when the moon is dark and the forest is perfectly quiet, I imagine I see a shadow with 12-foot wings circling high above the reservoir, keeping his promise to watch over the sacred places forever. The Phantom of Timber Ridge found his peace, not through revenge, but through protection. And in protecting the dead, he learned to spare the living. Some spirits, it turns out, can be reasoned with. You just have to understand what they're really fighting for. The bones of our ancestors lie beneath that water still, and Flying Eagle stands guard over them as he promised he would. The sacred places are safe, the dead are at peace, and the living can walk through the forest without fear. That's a better ending than most ghost stories get. And it's all true, every word of it. I should know. I was there. My name is James Riverstone, but everyone calls me Jim. I've been a park ranger at Mark Twain National Forest for 16 years now, and before that, I spent 12 years working coal mines down in Kentucky. I've pulled more people out of dark holes than I care to count. Cave-ins, gas leaks, lost explorers, you name it, I've dealt with it. People around here call me the Cave Whisperer, which always makes me laugh. There's nothing magical about what I do. It's just experience and common sense. When you've been trapped under 1,000,000 tons of rock 3 different times, you'll learn to read the signs. You know which sounds mean trouble, and which ones are just the earth settling. You understand how air moves through tunnels, and why some passages feel wrong even when they look safe. That's why I never believed in the old stories about cave devils and underground monsters. Miners have always told tales to explain away accidents and strange sounds. Bad air makes people see things that aren't there. Fear plays tricks on your mind when you're alone in the dark. At least, that's what I thought. Until October 15th, 1964. The radio crackled to life around 2 p.m. that Tuesday. "Jim, we got a situation at Lost Creek. 3 cave explorers went missing 2 days ago. They were checking out the new cave system near Miller's Ridge. I knew the area well. Lost Creek had always been off limits for casual exploring the limestone. Formations were unstable, and the water table made some passages flood without warning. Only experienced cavers were allowed permits, and even then, they had to file detailed plans. What's their last known position?" I asked, already grabbing my gear. "They found a new tunnel system, about 200 feet down from the main entrance. We found their base camp equipment, but something's wrong with it. You need to see this yourself." 20 minutes later, I stood at the mouth of Lost Creek Cave, staring at the strangest thing I'd ever seen in 16 years of rescue work. The cave entrance looked different, wider, like someone had been digging it out recently. But that wasn't the weird part. The missing explorers' equipment was arranged in a perfect circle around the cave mouth. Backpacks, water bottles, camping gear, all positioned exactly the same distance apart. No one sets up camp like that. It looked more like a warning sign than a base camp. "Deputies found it just like this," said Sheriff Murphy, a good man who'd worked with me on dozens of rescues. "No sign of struggle, no blood, nothing missing, just ... arranged." I picked up one of their flashlights. The metal casing had deep gouges in it, teeth marks, but unlike anything I'd seen before. Too big for bats, too small for bears. The jaw pattern was all wrong, like it came from some giant insect. "Jim, there's something else," Murphy said quietly. Their climbing rope was cut clean through, not frayed or worn, sliced, like someone used a very sharp knife. I held up the rope end. The cut was perfectly smooth, almost surgical. But there were traces of something else on the fibers, a clear, sticky substance that smelled sweet and sick at the same time. It reminded me of the chemicals we used in the mines, but stronger and more organic. The wind shifted, carrying air up from the cave mouth. That same sweet sick smell hit me full force, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. It was the smell of something, rotting, but not quite dead yet. "I'm going down," I announced, checking my headlamp and safety gear. "Jim, maybe we should wait for the state boys. Those people have been missing for 2 days. If they're still alive, they won't be much longer." I clipped my safety line to a sturdy oak. "I'll radio every 15 minutes. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, seal this cave and call in the cavalry." The first 100 feet down felt normal. Standard limestone cave, wet walls, stable rock, the usual echo of dripping water. My headlamp beam swept back and forth, looking for any sign of the missing explorers. The air was cool and damp, exactly what you'd expect. But at 150 feet, things started feeling wrong. The tunnel walls showed scratch marks, deep gouges in solid rock that formed regular patterns. Something with very large claws had been widening. These passages, the scratches were fresh, cutting through mineral deposits that had taken decades to form. At 200 feet, I found the new tunnel the explorers had discovered. It branched off from the main passage, heading deeper into the earth. The opening had definitely been enlarged. You could see where natural cave formations had been broken away to make room for something much bigger than a human. I switched on my backup light and started down the new passage. The scratches on the walls were everywhere now, and there was something else, a thin, sticky residue coating the rock surfaces. It felt like spiderweb, but much stronger. My knife blade couldn't cut through it. "Base, this is Jim. I'm 200 feet down, investigating. The new tunnel found evidence of large animal activity. The explorers definitely came this way. I can see their footprints in the mud." "Copy that, Jim. How large an animal are we talking about?" I measured one of the claw marks with my fingers. 7 feet, tall, maybe bigger, multiple claws on each foot. I've never seen anything like it. 50 feet further into the new tunnel, I found the first web. It stretched completely across the passage. Not random spiderweb, but an organized barrier made of the same sticky material I'd been seeing on the walls. The strands were thick as my thumb and arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Mathematical precision that no natural spider could create. Behind the web, I could see something moving. I cut through the sticky strands with my emergency saw. The material was incredibly strong. It took real effort to break through. As soon as I made a hole big enough to squeeze through, that sweet smell hit me like a punch to the face. Base. I'm entering a large chamber about 250 feet down. There's something in here. The first missing explorer was wrapped in web material, suspended from the ceiling like a cocoon, but he was still alive. His eyes were open, tracking my movement. He tried to speak, but only a wet, gurgling sound came out. I climbed up to reach him, my hands shaking as I cut away the web strands. What I found underneath will haunt me for the rest of my life. His body was dissolving. The web material was filled with some kind of digestive fluid that was slowly melting him from the outside. His skin was soft and partially liquid, but his muscles and bones were still intact. He was being eaten alive, and the process was designed to keep him conscious through the whole thing. Jesus Christ, I whispered, nearly losing my grip on the rock face. The man's eyes met mine. He was still fully aware, still human inside that dissolving shell. I could see the terror and pleading in his gaze. He wanted me to end his suffering. I did what I had to do. It was the only mercy I could give him. From deeper in the cave came a sound that made my blood freeze, a complex chittering noise, like giant insects talking to each other. Not random animal sounds, but organized communication, intelligence. Base, I need backup down here right now, and bring explosives. Jim, what did you find? Something that shouldn't exist. I followed the chittering sounds deeper into the cave system. The tunnels had been completely transformed, natural limestone passages enlarged into a network of chambers and corridors that felt almost architectural. These weren't random animal burrows. Someone, or something, had planned this layout. The walls were covered in more of those geometric web patterns, but now I could see they served a purpose. Some sections pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow, providing dim lighting throughout the complex. Other areas were sticky barriers that could trap anything that tried to force its way through. In a third chamber, I found the second missing explorer. He was still alive, but barely human anymore. His chest had been cut open and filled with clusters of pale, translucent eggs. Each one was about the size of a chicken egg, but they moved and shifted inside their membrane sacs. Something was growing in there, using his body as an incubator. Kill ... me ... double quotes, he whispered when he saw my light. His voice was barely recognizable, distorted by the changes happening to his throat and mouth. But before I could act, he spoke again, and this time, it wasn't his voice at all. New voice joins the song, he said in a tone that sounded like multiple people speaking in harmony. Colony grows stronger. Surface dwellers bring gifts of flesh and breeding space. I backed away, my hand moving to the pistol on my belt. Whatever was talking, it wasn't the explorer anymore. We remember you, James Riverstone, cave walker, tunnel breaker. You will join the harmony soon. That's when I noticed the cave paintings. The walls of this chamber were covered in ancient artwork, Native American symbols and figures that had been painted here hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. The images showed creatures that were part insect, part human, emerging from underground. Tunnels, stick figures ran in terror, while the bug things captured them and dragged them back into the earth. At the bottom of one painting was a symbol I recognized from my mining days, a warning mark that meant deep danger, stay away. The local tribes had known about these things long before white settlers arrived. They'd tried to warn people, but no one listened. The chittering sounds were getting closer now, coming from multiple directions. I wasn't alone in these tunnels anymore. I found the third explorer in a chamber that looked like a nursery. Hundreds of egg clusters covered the walls and ceiling, each one in a different stage of development. Some were just pale sacs of fluid. Others showed dark shapes moving inside, almost ready to hatch. The explorer was suspended in the center of it all, but he was changing. His arms were elongating, growing additional joints. His skin was hardening into segmented plates. Extra limbs were sprouting from his torso. But his eyes were still human, still aware. It doesn't hurt, he said, and his voice was his own. The change ... It feels natural. Like this is what I was always supposed to become. Fight it, I told him, though I knew it was useless. You're still human. You can still choose. No, he said sadly. I can feel their thoughts now. All of them, singing together. Individual consciousness is just loneliness. The colony is so much better, so much stronger. His eyes began to glow with the same bioluminescent light as the web patterns. When he looked at me, I felt something trying to push into my mind, a warm, welcoming presence that promised an end to isolation and fear. I fought it off, but just barely. They're coming to the surface soon, he said in that harmonized voice. This colony is getting too crowded. Time to establish new breeding grounds up in the light. That's when I heard them approaching, the scraping sound of multiple large bodies moving through the tunnels. Chittering communication that was getting more excited, more urgent. The lurkers had found me. The first one squeezed through the tunnel, opening like a nightmare made real. 7 feet tall, with a body structure that mixed the worst parts of praying mantis and human. Its head was triangular and insectoid, with compound eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like mirrors. Multiple arms extended from its torso, some ending in human-like hands, others in razor-sharp claws that could slice through rock. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of needle teeth, and when it spoke, acidic saliva dripped from its jaws and sizzled on the cave floor. Cave Walker comes to join the song, it said in that horrible harmonized voice. Colony has waited. Colony has prepared. 2 more lurkers emerged from side passages, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of shared intelligence. They weren't just hunting, they were executing a planned capture strategy. I drew my pistol and fired 3 shots center mass at the closest creature. The bullets struck its hardened shell and ricocheted off harmlessly. These things had natural armor that could stop small arms fire. The lead lurker tilted its head, almost like it was amused. Then it opened its mouth wider and spat a stream of clear liquid that struck the cave wall next to my head. The rock began dissolving immediately, filling the air with acrid smoke. Acid. They could spit acid. I ran. The tunnel system worked against me now. What had been a carefully planned colony layout became a maze where every passage might lead to a dead end. Behind me, I could hear the lurkers moving with that same coordinated precision, herding me toward whatever destination they had in mind. But I still had one advantage. I understood caves better than they understood mining techniques. I reached into my pack and pulled out the emergency explosives I always carried. Standard mining charges, designed to bring down unstable rock formations. If I could place them correctly, I might be able to collapse enough tunnels to trap the colony underground. The 4th missing explorer was in the next chamber, caught in the middle of the feeding process. The lurkers had him suspended in their web material while acid slowly dissolved his lower body. He was still conscious, still screaming. I couldn't save him, but I could make sure this never happened to anyone else. I placed the first charge at the base of a support column that held up the main tunnel junction. The explosion would bring down several passages at once, cutting off the colony's access to the surface. The lurkers appeared at both tunnel entrances as I armed the detonator. They moved slowly now, confident that I was trapped. The lead creature spoke in its harmonized voice. Colony offers joining. Colony offers harmony. Individual consciousness is pain. Colony is peace. Go to hell, I said, and triggered the first explosion. The blast brought down tons of rock, sealing off the main breeding chamber, but I could hear them on the other side, already starting to dig through the rubble. This would only slow them down, not stop them. I placed the second charge in the tunnel that led back to the surface, then ran for the original cave entrance as fast as I could move. Behind me, the lurkers were giving chase, their chittering communication now filled with rage instead of confidence. The explosion caught me. Just as I reached the main cave passage, the shockwave threw me forward, and falling rocks struck my helmet and shoulders. But I kept moving, climbing toward daylight and safety. I triggered the third charge as I reached the cave mouth, bringing down the entire entrance behind me. Sheriff Murphy found me sitting outside the collapsed cave, staring at the pile of rubble that now sealed the entrance to Lost Creek. I was covered in rock dust and blood, but alive. The explorers, he asked. Dead, all of them. I stood up slowly, my body aching from the explosions in cavern. But we need to make sure this place stays sealed. Forever. The official report listed it as a tragic cave-in caused by unstable rock formations. The area was declared permanently off limits to exploration. I recommended placing seismic monitoring equipment throughout the region, disguised as earthquake research instruments, because I knew the explosions hadn't killed the colony, I'd only trapped them. Over the next 20 years, I watched those monitoring stations carefully. In 1987, the sensors detected movement in the sealed sections. They were digging out, just like I knew they would. I placed additional charges in strategic locations, creating multiple backup collapse points. Every time they got close to breaking through, I brought down more rock. It became a waiting game, their patience against my preparation. I trained my replacement in what I called cave safety protocols, teaching him to recognize the warning signs without telling him what he was really watching for. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share directly. The monitoring network expanded over the years, covering the entire limestone cave region. We found evidence of other colonies, places where explorers had gone missing, where strange equipment, arrangements had been found, where local tribes had painted warning symbols on rock faces. I spent my final years in the Park Service tracking underground movement patterns, becoming an expert in what the official reports called cave structure analysis. The truth stayed buried in bureaucratic language and scientific terminology. When I retired in 1985, the containment system was working. Multiple lurker sites were sealed and monitored. Legal barriers prevented casual exploration. Government red tape had become our best weapon against supernatural threats. But containment isn't victory, it's just delayed defeat. The colonies are still down there, still growing, still evolving. Ancient intelligence adapting to our containment methods while planning their eventual emergence. Each generation becomes smarter, more patient, more dangerous. I'm an old man now, but I still check the monitoring reports every week. Still watch for the signs that mean they're getting ready to try again. Because some things dig too deep to ever truly die. And someday, when the colony has grown large enough and smart enough, they'll find a way to reach the surface. When that happens, humanity will face something it's never dealt with before. A hive mind that's been planning our conversion for centuries. The lurkers of Lost Creek are still down there, singing their harmonized songs in the darkness, waiting for their time to rise. I just hope I'm not around to see it when they do.